actually in the Northgate Village Apartments now.
Well, I can tell you it's been a very, very dangerous and extremely fast pursuit. They've been chasing that van right there. Now,
It's exactly what he's doing. Are you Googling the laws right now?
Henderson Police Department's SWAT team responded to the scene and set up a perimeter around the condominium.
I travel in and out of time zones.
And the 3 key rules for a criminal defense lawyer: always on time, impeccably dressed, and occasionally sober.
The yellow sports car up ahead won't stop. Then, something happens you might expect in a Spider-Man movie. It wraps around the tire of the fleeing vehicle and stops all forward motion.
Objection, asked and answered.
I mean, he leaps over the fucking bench.
No, the thing is, that's my property. You have no choice.
Actually, I do, because I found friggin' Xanax bars on your driver's seat. If you want to explain something, explain those.
Cops get very frustrated when you don't answer their questions.
No.
Step back forward! He's gonna go straight. There's a car right here. Got him.
All right, I'm going to excuse everyone. Mr. Brooks is being removed from the courtroom.
This is fucking hilarious. So he pulls out a joint in court.
Go, 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 go! Turn on your stomach! Stop fighting us! Stop resisting!
The injury by the police, that may be a separate issue for you to file a civil suit.
Chris, just while he's doing that, talk to me. What were you running for again?
Warrant.
Warrants? A felony warrant? City warrants what?
Felony warrant on Kansas.
Well, I'm pretty sure they ran you, and you don't have any warrants.
I don't. No. No warrants.
No. It's all that for nothing, right? No warrants, no nothing.
Yeah.
Police! A little farther back. A little more. Okay, go.
I'm not finna sit here and let you fix the trial because you don't want to tell the truth to the jury.
We're there, guys. Got eyes on.
I want to suck it. Yes, I think I would like to suck your dick. I don't think so.
I prefer not to.
I prefer not to, sir. See that? I love that.
So do you wish to say anything?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Well, hello. Welcome back. Welcome here. Welcome to the Defense Rests. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming from. Welcome. I'm Jody, and buckle in, buckle out, buckle up and buckle down, you true crimers, because we have lots to talk about. Namely, Jennifer McCabe. I had no intentions whatsoever of following this trial, but alas, I started watching it, and the rest is history. So, Jennifer McCabe. I've done a bit of a deep dive. I've got a timeline that's 99% finished, but I'll bring that up with the Brian Higgins recap tomorrow. But I thought I would get on tonight and go through day 2 of Jennifer McCabe's cross-examination and redirect and recross, because it's full of juicy stuff. But first, I just thought I'd share with you all. I created a song with AI for Tyrone Tucker, just to create a bit of bit more awareness and to just keep the cogs, the wheels turning. So let's play that for you for now, shall we?
Tucker is his name, and his life is not the same since the wrongful dawn arrest while he was down in Key West. Matthew Bonnet lost his life by the stabbing of a knife, and in Treehouse kind of shack two assailants did attack. The main suspect for the crime only served minimal time. Johnson took a plea, and Rory Wilson lost the key. All the evidence in court was from a witness that was bought. Paula Belmont testified, but the court felt justified to charge Tucker with the crime and waste 2 years of his time. It was down in Monroe County, and $2 million was the bounty, so he spent 2 years in jail until Oren posted bail. His pros say he would defend his innocence until the end. And Judge Jones, with all his fury, got upset by hung jury. So the prosecutors filed, but they want another trial. They disqualified the judge, cause they knew he held a grudge. So Judge Morgan takes the case, and conditions are put in place. So when Tucker missed the test, he served a warrant for his arrest. 3.1 is now the bounty issued out of Monroe County. Crooked cops put him through hell, locked him up in a jail cell. Now they claim he tried to flee. Won't you set poor Tucker free?
Yes, I know. I'm an idiot, but I couldn't help it. And yeah, I wrote it and I think it's great. So there you go. Take it or leave it. All right. So shall we get into it? Let's do it. Thank you, Court TV. Welcome, Jennifer McCabe. Don't you start buffering. What are you buffering for? There's nothing else.
All right, so that will come into evidence, and jurors, sometimes I do have to repeat myself a bit, but this is, again, before you can. All right, so.
All right, so we have Jen McCabe on the stand in her nice neutral tones, which are non-offensive.
Take a look at that report.
And she's a lot more perky today. Very pleasant, well-mannered.
I know you didn't draft it, but you recognize that that's an incident report from the police, Canton Police specifically.
Yes.
Could you turn to the tab that's the little light blue tab, maybe 3 pages from the end of that report?
Yes.
I'd like you to read
This is
that
triple
paragraph to
length
yourself,
report.
if you wouldn't mind, please.
The morning after the incident, she's refreshing her recollection. She seems to forget a lot. Very combative witness, in my opinion. Hello, kitty. Come on, Jen.
You have that in mind?
I do, yes.
Okay, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. What you read just now appears to be a report of the incident in which Sergeant Lank came back to 34 Fairview to give you an opportunity to tell him whatever it was that you thought was important, correct?
Was that a full report, or is that just an excerpt from it?
Well,
That
it was
paragraph.
That right there is a full report of that incident of Sergeant Lank going back to 34 Fairview. Would you agree?
Well, that's not a full report of what I said, but if that's his full report, it's his full report.
Okay. And in this report, what he writes that you said to him,
Objection.
The objection sustained.
isn't it true that what you actually told Sergeant Lank when he returned is that while driving around with her and Roberts looking for the victim, Miss Reed said something to the effect of, quote, "I hope I didn't hit him," end quote. Isn't that what you told him?
Yes, because she said that when we were driving around.
And then you went on to say that, quote, she, Karen Reed, made these statements again at the scene when the victim was discovered, correct?
Correct.
And then you went on to say she, Karen Reed, I'm sorry, that you thought that Reed may have made these same statements in front of a police officer, but she was not sure, meaning you were not sure, correct?
I was not sure if she made what the police officers may have heard. That report is his recollection. My recollection is I told him that she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And I told him that he should ask the responders if they heard that, because it was a great possibility that they heard it as well.
But none of that, you'll agree, you just read the report. None of
No.
that is in his report.
That's a very brief report.
I didn't ask you if it was brief. I asked you if it was
The report's a report, lady.
Correct.
And that's a report of a conversation that he had at 34 Fairview with you for the specific purpose of memorializing what you told him, correct?
Correct.
And what you told him, according to Sergeant Lank, is she said one phrase, I hope I didn't hit him, correct?
That's what's in the report.
Yes.
All right. And again, this was
Welcome, Laura.
2.5,
Welcome.
3 hours after
I don't either.
the incident,
And
not
yes.
2.5 years later, correct?
I've watched this 3 times now, and it gets better every time. And every time I've forgotten to take down the timestamp, so I'm just going to wing it today. But enjoy. Welcome. Hey. Let's get back.
Correct.
Very combative witness. Very.
Ms. McCabe, we talked yesterday about this unrecorded meeting that you had in front of Sergeant Lank's home on January 30th. Do you remember that conversation?
I remember the conversation, yes.
Have you had any other home visits with any other police officers
Absolutely
involved in this case?
I went to visit.
I'm actually waiting. I'll do that tomorrow because they've got no court on tomorrow. So I'll spend tomorrow's live stream following that up because they left on a legal issue with the FBI stuff, which I'm dying to find out. So what I might do is watch it and react, like watch Emily Baker's live stream. Yeah, Emily Baker's live stream and react to that because she'll give me the legal terminology and side of it, like of how that impacts his testimony and the actual case itself, because I'm not sure how that plays into it. But
I went
can't
to
wait to
drop
find out.
off. It was not a visit. It was myself with Kerry Roberts dropping her daughter off. There was no involvement of Mike Lank on this day.
Have you been to the home, the personal residence of any other police officer involved in this case?
Yes.
Ever?
Yes.
Michael Proctor.
Tell me who.
Kevin Albert.
Who else?
I went to Elizabeth Proctor, the wife of Michael Proctor's house.
Who does Elizabeth Proctor live with?
Michael Proctor.
So you actually went to Michael Proctor's personal residence, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Okay. That was in September of what year?
23.
I agree.
I went over.
23.
Yes.
Oh, yes. He's coming.
Why'd you go to Michael Proctor's house in
coming.
September of 2023?
I met Elizabeth Proctor in approximately July or August of 2023. We are two mothers that are being viciously terrorized and harassed by social media. Things that were stated in this courtroom and allegations that were made have torn our lives upside down. We receive hate letters saying that they
I'm
hope
asking you
things.
why? I know you want to give a narrative.
She gets to answer this, Mr. Jackson. The door's open.
Your Honor, she should
Poor
answer the
May.
question why she
Poor
went to the
little
house
Jen.
as opposed to the narrative behind her motivation.
It sounds to me like she's explaining why she went to the house. The door was open, Mr. Jackson.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
We
Well, it
receive
wasn't open at
letters,
34
we
Fairview, was
receive
it?
emails, we receive calls. People drive by our house. There was a rolling rally outside of my house where people just
Yeah.
screamed at
And
us.
You've seen the video footage of the rolling rally on Turtle Boy's YouTube page. It's very peaceful, and it's mainly women, the elderly, and a few children. Notice how so many of the same witnesses have used. Oh yes, and the butt dials. They're very talented family, the McAlberts. Very talented. They can do lots of things with their butts.
They take pictures of our children. They took a picture of my daughter and put semen on it and said property of some named blogger that I think the defense is very familiar with. So that is why myself and Elizabeth Proctor got together. Michael Proctor was not home. We are two mothers trying to get through the unthinkable together.
So you were upset about the public outrage concerning your family's involvement in the death of John O'Keefe.
I was outraged because I am a state witness that is being tortured because of lies.
Because of public outrage concerning your family's involvement in the death of a police officer, correct?
No, it's a social media witch hunt.
I see. So you decided that the best way for you to address that angst that you were feeling is to go to the lead investigator's home, personal home, in this case, correct?
I went to visit Elizabeth Proctor. Michael Proctor was not home.
So just like
I want to be besties with you because I want to know what your husband knows.
Sergeant Lank's house, and the only person you met with was his wife. When you went to Michael Proctor's house, your claim is the only person you met with was his wife.
I personally did not go to Mike Lanks. It was not Jen going to Michael Lanks. It was Kerry Roberts dropping her daughter off, and I happened to be in the car with her. Elizabeth Proctor I met with because we couldn't take the torture any longer.
And you were later asked about this unrecorded visit at Trooper Proctor's home by
welcome,
correct?
Can you remind me?
Sure. Did you have a conversation with a trooper by the name of Tully, who interviewed you specifically?
I've had lots of conversations with
about
lots of
your contact with Michael Proctor.
Could I see the report to refresh my memory?
Do you not remember having a conversation with Trooper Tully?
I've had many conversations over the last 2 years.
Trooper Tully?
Over the last 2 years with a number of troopers.
Okay. Do you? All I'm asking you is, do you? And I've got a report that can refresh your recollection. I want to know, first of all, do you remember having a conversation about your relationship with Michael and Elizabeth Proctor with Trooper Tully?
I know I had a conversation with a trooper about it. I don't remember exactly which trooper.
Fair enough. May I approach?
Yes.
I'm going to show you this page.
Thank you.
Take a look at
Mommy.
the face page of that, read it to yourself. And then I'd ask you to turn to the tabbed page, which is paragraph 27.
Okay.
You have that in mind?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
She answers.
Does that refresh your recollection,
the judge.
Ms. McCabe, that you had a conversation or an interview, formal interview, with Trooper Tully about your relationship with Elizabeth and Michael Proctor?
Yes.
And you told, actually, let me back up for a second. Okay, was that somewhere in the vicinity of September, late September, early October, when you had that conversation?
Is there a date on it?
Oh, you pedantic little fuck.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
There's a date stamp on the bottom. Take a look at that date stamp on the bottom and tell me if that refreshes your recollection of about the time that that conversation would have taken place.
Well, the date stamp on the bottom is when it was, I'm assuming, entered into evidence,
Right.
but that doesn't say when the interview itself was.
Right. So if you'll agree with me, you know that you had the meeting with Elizabeth, at Elizabeth and Michael Proctor's home sometime in September 2023, correct?
Correct.
If that's dated October of 2023. That's what I'm trying to get to. I don't know the date because it's not dated.
So I don't either.
So do you think it was between September and October?
It must have been.
Had to have been, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Before I get to that, I've got a couple of other questions. You had, at some point, multiple phone calls with Michael Proctor after January 29th, 2022, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Do you remember all the phone calls that you had with him?
No, I don't.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at a log of your phone calls?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
May I approach you?
Yes. Is this what was marked 00 or
It's
00
not.
this morning?
That will be next.
Okay.
This is just a full ones that are tabbed. I don't have the records in front of me. Maybe they'll be found before the end of our conversation. But in the meantime, for expedition, do you remember a call on February 14th with Trooper Proctor lasting about 17 minutes?
I don't know.
Do you remember a call on February 17th lasting about 2 minutes?
I don't know.
Do you remember a call on February 28th lasting about 2 minutes?
Nuh-uh. I don't recall. Again, if it's hard.
I expect that your answer is going to be, I don't recall, but I want to make a record if I could. So this is not a test of your memory at this point. I don't expect you to have it memorized. I just want to ask if maybe one of these stand out in your mind, or all of them. What about a second call on February 28th lasting about a minute?
Don't recall.
On March 1st, another call with Trooper Proctor lasting about a minute.
I do not recall.
Apparently a second call on March.
Keep going.
Mind, in the early morning hour time frame.
Don't believe so.
Ms. McCabe, if you wanted to know in general how long it takes for a human being to pass away because of exposure to extreme temperatures, right? If you wanted to know the answer to that, what would you Google search? What phrase would you use?
You know exactly what she used, Mr. Jackson.
I'm not sure. All I recall is what the defendant asked me to Google in the morning.
Really?
If you wanted to know, I'm asking a different question. If you personally wanted to know, how long does it take for a person to die of exposure due to extreme temperatures, what would you put in? What phrase would you use?
Objection.
Sustain.
How long to die in cold?
Well, we don't have to guess at the phrase that you would use if you wanted to know something about dying.
You're a
of hypothermia,
smart ass.
do we? Did you actually Google searched it?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask that differently, please.
Did you, in fact, use a phrase to Google search how long it takes for someone to die of extreme temperatures?
I did in the morning at the request of your client.
Okay. And what phrase did you use?
What about the one you deleted?
I'm not sure.
Really?
Correct. I was.
After 2.5 years of this, you don't know the phrase that you used?
Objection, Your Honor.
There's so many lies
Okay,
and
there's no
misconceptions
question.
on social media.
No question.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay.
Are you telling me you don't remember what Google search you put in?
Karen was screaming. My hands were shaking. And she was saying, Google hypothermia. How long does it take to die in the cold?
And what phrase did you put in your phone? I'm just asking you to say it.
Why don't you show me it?
You literally don't remember?
I'm not eating.
Again, she was screaming, Google hypothermia. How long does it take to die in the cold?
How about?
And I picked up my phone and I started Googling.
And you literally, to this day, right now, under oath, you're saying
How are
you
you,
don't
Brian?
remember that phrase that you used.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that at her
Do you remember it or do you not, Ms. McCabe?
I'm
That's a
going to
simple
argue
question.
every little
that
semantic.
morning, I don't remember specifically what I Googled, but I do know what you've put out to the social media.
How about this? Hoss long to die in cold. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it's been
Why
everywhere
does that sound so familiar?
because you've put it out in social media.
Well, I
No,
haven't put
because you
anything out on
typed
social
in your
media because I don't
phone.
personally have social media.
I'm sorry, Turtle Boy did.
So if the world happens to know it, that's not.
So I actually watched quite a bit of Turtle Boys videos, and before I saw all this testimony, that was one of the reasons why I got addicted to this case, because I had no intention whatsoever of following it. But pretty much everything that he said has come to light. So he's an investigative journalist. I might not agree with all of his behavior and his methodology, but what he has shared is exactly what has come to light in this trial, and this is one of them. And the defense actually had to fight really, really hard to get this the phone records to be allowed in as evidence. So they really, really tried to stop this from coming in, and no wonder why. Very well, thank you, Bri. Very well. Well, as good as you can be with arthritis in the winter. But apart from that, I'm good. Hope everything's well at your end, and you're enjoying being back at work.
Not on me, is it?
I guess not.
I guess not. How long to die in cold is what you put in to the Google search, right?
If you say so.
Is there a reason that you don't want to admit to that?
Absolutely not.
It's a simple question, right?
No reason.
So say it. What Google search did you use?
Objection.
Sustained.
Just show it. You've got the phone records.
You were seeking at some point to Google how long to die in the cold, correct?
Correct.
And you made a mistake and mistakenly typed how long to die in cold, correct?
You could show me it. I'd appreciate it.
You've been through 2 grand juries.
You later Google searched. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I just watched the blink rate. Hi, Gabby.
Thank you.
Welcome.
While she looks at that, Mr. Jackson, can we bring our clerk back upstairs?
Of course, yes. I think we're.
Thank you very much. Can you text Jimmy and tell him?
Well, I just saw Lally drool when that caught my eye and didn't read the rest of it. I had a mental image happening.
Yes,
Sorry.
it does.
Does that appear to be an accurate page from a Celebrite extraction from your phone?
It does.
Okay. May I have that back? I'm sorry, may I approach?
Yes.
May I have that back for a second?
You're pretending like you've never seen it
Did
before.
you see this, the actual search phrase? Does
Yes.
that now refresh your recollection?
Yes.
But I'd like to have this marked as next in order. Exhibit, please.
Oh, her
Is there
credibility.
an
is-
objection, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, I can't get it. I can't unsee that now, Laura. Yes.
Yes. Is that, Madam Court Reporter? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope she chokes it.
Oh.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, look at that. There you go. Good one, Mr. Jackson. Hoss long.
Does this appear to be the document that was just marked as Exhibit 99?
Yes.
No, she's got MS.
I know it's a little bit small. This column,
Yes.
third column from the
We should
actual
create that
fourth
game.
column from the left. One is
We
Dave's
should have a Jen McCabe
some-
drinking game.
data, and then a Google search, correct?
Correct.
What does that Google search say?
House long to die in cold.
Now,
Oh, look
you
at that.
indicate
It
that
was
you
deleted
did that.
as well.
You made that search at 6:23 a.m., correct?
Correct.
And then you indicated that you did it again thereafter at 6:24, correct?
Correct.
At 6:24, you misspelled the phrase and you spelled it as follows: how long T-I die in CIKD, correct?
Correct.
Oh, yes.
Now you claim that those two searches were at
It would be
6:23
very
and
dangerous, but
6:24 a.m.
absolutely
respectively,
hysterical.
correct?
Objection.
Phrase it differently.
Sure. You've indicated under direct examination that these two searches were at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m., right?
I don't know if I
Yeah,
gave
but not this
exact
one.
times, but I said
But
it was in the morning and
3:27.
Karen had asked me to do it.
And you claimed that you searched it because Karen was screaming at you and yelling at you, Google hypothermia, and you Googled how long does it take for a person to die. I'm sorry, she said something like, how long does it take for a person to die of hypothermia? And you Google searched it at 6:23 and 6:24. Is that right?
Again, I'm not sure about the exact times. I just did it after Karen asked me to do it.
Uh-huh.
Did you quarrel with the idea that those were about 30 seconds apart?
Okay.
And you're aware, Ms. McCabe,
Go
that
for it,
both
right?
spellings, both misspellings
Every time she
of
says,
that phrase result
refresh my
in the
recollection.
exact same search results, don't they?
I'm not aware of that. No.
Well, you Googled them, ma'am. You're looking on your phone and you Googled how long to die in cold and how long to die in CIKD. Both of those. You Googled them, right?
I did. Yes.
And they result in the exact same search results, don't they?
I have no idea.
So my question to you is,
No, because you thought you was
Why the two
too
searches?
smart for that.
She was standing next to me, screaming, shaking
thought you
my
were in the back of
hand.
the
My
car.
hand was cold. I was trying to Google it. Obviously, maybe whatever came up first didn't make sense because I had some misspellings. So I did it again.
so how long to die in cold?
Blame it on whoever you like,
in
love.
articles
No
concerning
judgment here.
dying of exposure, doesn't it?
We never got the chance to read it.
Well, you're the one, when you say we, who's we?
Karen and myself.
Well, you're the one holding the phone, Ms. McCabe.
Correct.
So you're looking down at your phone and you see exactly what comes up, correct?
I don't remember exactly what came up.
Well, what came up was something about dying of hypothermia, didn't it?
That's what she asked.
So why do it again?
You're so nasty.
Why do it again, Miss McCabe? You had the result. Why the second search?
I cannot answer that beyond telling you that my hands were frozen. She was shaking me and screaming at me.
And you see the time. Let me scroll up, please.
Actually, I know what you can take a shot every
According to
time
that
she says,
accelerator data,
what is it? I was in a state
see
of
this first
shock.
search that says hospital
State of
dying
shock.
cold?
I do.
What's that time?
You've got the, it's right over at 2:27.
AM or PM?
Ah, and 40
AM.
seconds. Look at that.
Ms. McCabe, you made that search at 2:27 a.m. Because you knew that John O'Keefe was outside in your sister's lawn dying in the cold, didn't you?
Absolutely not. I did not make that search at that time. No.
Realized the
I
next
didn't
morning,
delete any messages or any
after
phone
John
calls
was
either.
discovered, after 6 a.m., that you had an incriminating search on your phone, didn't you?
Absolutely not.
To cover your tracks, you searched it again.
I
in
can't
order
see
to
that either,
overwrite
Brian.
The original search
Brian
at
Albert and Nicole
2:27.
Albert. Yeah,
Correct.
no.
Again, absolutely not.
But you were nervous and you screwed it up. So the first search you made at 6:23 was Hoslong to die in CIKD.
Yes, all right, we get
No.
that. Next.
And when you say as far as you saw the vehicle move, did you see the vehicle physically move, or it was in one place and then
Oh,
you
this
came
is
back later and
recross.
it was different?
It
Oh,
was
sorry,
in one place,
redirect.
and then when I came back, it was further up.
Now, at any of those points in time that you took a glance out the storm door, did you see anybody outside of the vehicle?
No.
Did you see inside of the vehicle?
No.
Did you see anybody outside other than Julie Nagel on the front lawn, front walkway, or anything else?
No.
At any point in time while you were at
Yeah,
the
now
report
that
therapy
gets
that
me,
night, did you
that
see John?
Julie Nagel,
No.
At any
when she
point
was
in time
picked
when you-
up. I've been working this timeline. Oh, I've lost it now. But I'll bring it up and save it for tomorrow. but the timeline with all of the phone calls between Jen and John, all of the text messages when Ricky and Ryan come to pick up Julie, it's all within like a 3-minute time span, and they all have differing recollections. And according to John's phone extraction records as well. It's very interesting.
You texted
Very
John
interesting.
O'Keefe after you arrived at Fairview. Did John O'Keefe respond?
No.
At any point in time after you arrived at Fairview, after you
Yeah,
hung up
Lally.
from the 1280
Keep going. La la la.
Ms. Roberts' phone, fair inference is the defendant's phone, correct?
Correct.
And so this phone call had been made or started recording at some point before you had even gotten out of the car, made your way over to Mr.
She didn't get out of the car at all. You can hear the windscreen wipers the entire time.
Connected to 911. So
La
at some
la
point,
lally.
it had to have been made in the car, correct?
Objection.
Did we just make a thing?
Ask it differently.
Do you know when that voicemail or that recording that you heard, do you know when that call was placed?
6:02.
Um,
I do.
Now, at the time that you are making the 911 call, where is the defendant in relation to the vehicle?
La la lally.
She is over with Mr. O'Keefe.
No, they're all at the waterfall. That's the one thing I've got to find for my timeline, because I've written down 1:30 he
You
left.
mentioned that the part
34
beyond
Fairview,
the
but
911 call where you
that
heard
can't be
yourself
correct.
talking, you're at the rear of Ms. Roberts'
His
vehicle?
testimony said
Yes.
And why are
it
you
wasn't
at the rear?
staying long, so I need to go over that tomorrow before I.
In the beginning, I'm at the rear
Finalize.
gathering towels or blankets. And then a few times I go to the rear because I'm trying to speak
I call bullshit.
with the 911, and
Bullshit.
Karen is screaming hysterically, and then Kerry stops.
You didn't get out of the car, lady. We heard the windscreen wipers going the entire time, and Kerry didn't have towels in her car. She had baby blankets. The towels and shit were inside your sister's house that you didn't go into.
That's screaming at her to calm down. It was quite
Miracle.
chaotic. So I was
Boyfriend
moving away
said.
so that I could be clear with the operators.
Mm-hmm. Oh, about the guy that lying in the snow? Yeah.
At some point, you went into your sister's house at 34 Fairview, right?
Yes.
And why did you?
Officer Lank asked me to go in and wake them up.
So you were asked to go in there by the police to wake them up, correct?
The 3 photos. Yes, Turtle Boy put it up the other day.
Point, you indicated that
Gold.
you had called Officer
I got
Lang
some
to
good
come back,
ones on my
right?
thumbnail
Yes.
as well.
And how did you get his number again?
Julie Albert.
And as far as you aware whether or not Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, or any of the other people that were present had Officer Lang's number?
Objection.
Sustain.
Why did you ask Julie Albert and not Brian Albert or Nicole Albert?
Because I knew she was the only one that had his number.
How would you know that? Why wouldn't Brian have it?
You were asked some questions about when you were on scene, and you indicated in your testimony on direct that you heard the defendant say, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." Correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You also early in your testimony had indicated that earlier in the morning.
I have to make up a
defendant
song
had
about that.
Phrased that differently as far as could I have hit him or did I? Correct?
Objection.
Sustained as to the form.
You heard the defendant make a variety of statements over the course of the night, correct?
If you
Yes.
go,
And
Laura, if you go onto Turtle Boy Live on YouTube, I think it was his last. Yeah, it was his last live stream. He actually has the newspaper in his hands, and he shows the front cover. It's good. Turtle Boy Live on YouTube. Aiden Kearney. He's the reporter that got kicked out of court halfway through the trial, because he has been following this trial for years and years and years, and has so much evidence, and that's who Jen McCabe is referring to when she says it's been a social media witch hunt. It's him she's referring to.
More to my point, as far as you recall,
You're welcome.
Testifying at another hearing under oath in June of 2020, correct?
Yes.
And were you
Yeah.
recall being asked some questions specifically about this topic?
Objection.
Allowed. Okay.
We got a sidebar.
In regard to that portion of you, in regard to those statements.
I don't recall specifics. I know what I.
No, you
I
don't
know what
recall.
I know. I know what happened.
Can I approach Ron?
Yes.
I'm giving you 2 pages. Direct your attention to
Welcome,
the bottom of the
welcome.
first page and then into the next page. If you could just review that to yourself and look up.
Let
Page
me know
again,
what
Mr.
you
Lally.
think of Jen McCabe in the chat.
8:15 and 8:17.
Thank you.
May I approach Ron?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Davis, remember you're fresh as to what you said in that prior proceeding in regard to those statements.
Yes.
What did you say?
Mm-hmm.
What did I say in that? I told them that Karen looked straight at me and said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And I said that there was, I believe, an EMT that overheard as well.
You made sure of that.
All in that same prior proceeding, being asked any questions, sort of at different times, the defendant saying different iterations of that same statement.
Objection.
Sustained as to form. No leading, Mr. Lally.
No leading,
With
Lala.
respect to that that's testimony in that same prior proceeding, what, if anything else, were you asked about statements the defendant made to you that morning?
I was asked what were some of the statements that Miss Reed had made. And
You can remember
it
a lot of
was
the
like,
stuff that Miss Reed
repeat, did I hit him? Could I have hit
Not
him?
much
Is he
else.
dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? I have a cracked tail light.
Oh, yeah, she's going to say
And
that.
then her, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
And so with respect
I
to
still call bullshit.
questions and as far as did I hit him or could I have hit him and the statement I hit him, those were at different times, correct?
Correct.
As if you're going to be saying, oh my God, my boyfriend, is he dead? Is he dead? My tail light's cracked. Hang on.
Now, you met with Trooper Proctor on January 29th, is that correct?
Correct.
Was that the first time that you had met him?
Correct.
Correct.
And who, if anyone, was with him when you met
And she was a
I
primary
believe
school
it was
teacher.
Trooper Yuri.
him? And subsequent to that day, did you meet with other troopers on state?
Yes.
And by other troopers, I mean not Trooper Proctor and not Trooper Yuri.
Yes.
And with respect to meeting with other troopers, was it at that point that they had talked to you about taking your phone?
Correct.
And
Only after you
they
deleted
asked
stuff.
you for your phone, is that correct?
I had shared my Life 3.
What I don't understand is why did they say to her, yes, you can delete this, the text messages with your daughters, knowing full well that they could extract that information anyway. Just saying. Yeah.
60 and my Life 360 and my texts, and they asked if they could take a copy of my phone.
And did you agree to that?
I agreed to it. Yes.
And were you presented a form at all in regard to your agreeing to hand over your phone?
Yes.
And beyond what you had testified to earlier, as far as things to do, were there any limitations that you put on what they could look at or take from your phone?
No limitations.
May I approach, Ron?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm showing you a document, again, just ask you to look at it.
I want to know how that recording thing works with the court reporter.
Just in general, ma'am, do you recognize that?
Yes,
What do you recognize that to be?
this was the consent form for my phone.
So that's the form you filled out with the troopers in regards to giving over your
Correct.
Zoom.
Your understanding that Mrs. Proctor had sustained similar issues as you had.
Correct.
And how did you find that out,
Again,
Jen?
Trooper Michael Proctor never met him prior to January 29, 2022, correct?
I have never met him prior. No.
And the time that you went over to meet with him.
Yes, her statement horrified me.
Horrified you.
Yes, that was horrifying.
And in that group
A
chat,
state of shock and
your
horror.
response to that horrifying statement was 3 words.
Yes,
I love it.
I'm right there with you,
Was there
Laura.
a response prior to that?
You tell me, ma'am. I'm not the one under oath. You are.
Well, if you want to show me it again, I'd love to.
Oh,
Get
that
So-
mommy smile. Oh,
Do you have it handy, Mr. Jackson?
I don't, Your Honor. I'll grab it.
so she just speaks normally into that, right? And
Your
it
Honor,
doesn't.
it's been marked and
Or does she have to whisper like this?
The packet this morning that I did. That's it. May I approach?
Sure.
She's in a state of shock and horror. Yeah, well, there you go. You learn something every day. Is your brain back working at micrograms per kilogram per milligram per mil per liter per hour? I don't miss that. I think my brain would have to explode doing those formulas again.
Yeah, Your Honor.
Yes.
You got the little cheat sheet hanging around your lanyard?
Take a look at those 2 pages. If you would.
Could you tell me what pages, please?
169 and the second page, Ms. McCabe, if you wouldn't mind.
What's the second number, Ms. McCabe?
Number, the bottom right.
You got the one finger thing
2170.
happening like me.
Thank you.
You have that in mind?
Yes, I do.
May I, Your Honor? Yes. Thank you. During that conversation, when you said she's telling them everything, that came right on the heels of your husband saying this girl could write a book, or this woman could write a book or something like that, correct?
Correct. She talks nonstop.
Right. And then you said 2 texts down,
You're a nasty piece of work.
she's telling them everything.
Correct.
The text just before that was, I love it.
That was in response to my husband saying this girl could write a book.
What's the next thing that you wrote to that group within a second of that?
She is telling them everything.
Right.
But weren't they all
Sure.
sitting around eating dinner when this was going on? So why is he texting her?
Nowhere in that text
She's
chain
texting
did you
him.
say something along the lines of, "Oh my goodness, I'm so."
I really don't
horrified."
think they
Did you?
Those were on
narcissists
phone
don't
conversations.
generally tend
Nowhere in
to
those texts that you just saw did you say the words or write the words. "I'm so
recognize
horrified."
that fact.
No, because it was already spoken about.
They don't take any responsibility.
You were asked on that morning, January 29th, 2022, at as you drove to the location and ultimately to 34 Fairview. What ultimately happened? And your testimony was, as you approached, my client was searching frantically for John O'Keefe, correct?
I don't believe I said she was searching frantically for John O'Keefe.
Searching frantically.
She was screaming frantically in the back seat and texting in the back seat.
Was she just sitting there, curled up in the back seat, sucking her thumb, or was she searching out the window?
She was screaming
Right.
between Kerry and I. So I'm not really sure how she saw John over here when her head is up here screaming and then looking down and texting.
Was the whole point of that trip, Ms. McCabe, to search for John?
It was because she knew where he was.
The whole point of that trip
in ice
was to
cream?
look for him, correct?
She directed us to go to 34 Fairview.
The whole point of the trip was to look for John, correct?
At 34 Fairview, where Karen said to go.
And your testimony is that if it hadn't been for Karen jumping out of that truck, you would have stopped, correct?
Because I wouldn't have seen him. I didn't know he was there. She did.
Yes or no? Was that your statement? If she hadn't gotten out of the car, you wouldn't have stopped.
I don't believe it was stated like that. I believe there was a question and I answered.
And the question was, would you have stopped? And your answer was what?
What was the direct question?
Oh my goodness, Miss McCabe. It was 5 minutes ago.
Did he ask, did you see something? You like to change words. I just want to be certain.
So, Mr. Jackson, just keep it to questions, not comments.
Just keep it to questions.
You were asked just a second ago by Mr. Lally if Karen Reed hadn't jumped out of the car, you wouldn't have stopped, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Well, not hard, was it?
All right, Ms. McCabe, we are finished. Jurors, I'm going to ask you to follow them out like you've done. We'll take
The
a
truth will
recess,
set you
and
free.
This one might be a little longer. I may need to.
Jurors folding and leaving your notebooks on the chairs. All rise. Follow me, jury out.
There's a great photo taken when Jen leaves here and Karen's looking at her in the background.
In an effort to save a little time, why don't I see counsel at sidebar to find out exactly what you want from me?
Waited a long, long time for that. Just watched her leave. All right, zoom, zoom. Next, we have Zifan. And
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and jury in the case now against you the truth,
I
the whole truth,
haven't
and nothing
worked.
but the truth, so help you God.
I haven't really worked out how I feel about this lady. Kerry Roberts.
All right, Mr. Lally. Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you,
Like they're all
state
like
your name and spell your last name?
housewives of
Carrie
Kansas.
Roberts, Roberts.
And where do you live, ma'am?
Canton, Mass.
And how long have you lived in Canton, Mass?
10 years.
And who, if anyone, do you live in Canton with?
My husband, my 2 children.
And your 2 children, how old are they? And boy, girl?
My son is 12, my daughter's 14.
And do you work, ma'am?
I do.
What do you do for work?
I'm an executive assistant.
How long have you been doing that?
17 years.
And your husband, Kurt, does he work as well?
Yes.
What does he do for work?
He's a heavy equipment operator.
And how long has he been doing that?
Maybe 20 plus years.
Now, if I could turn your attention to the evening of January 28th, 2022 into the morning of the 29th. Do you recall those dates? And do you recall what days of the week they were?
Say it again.
Do you recall what days of the week they were?
Friday.
So 28th.
Friday the 28th.
Into a
Saturday the 29th.
Now, on the evening of the 28th, do you recall what you were doing that evening?
I was bowling with my daughter and her friends and one of the mothers.
And then I did
do you
some
recall where that
crochet,
was?
Westgate Lanes in Brockton.
baked some
What
brownies.
time was it that you got home from that?
I'm a good little housewife.
Probably about 8:30ish because there was a storm coming, so we wanted to be home. I didn't want to be out late.
And when you got home, you and your daughter, is that correct?
Say that one more time.
You and your daughter came home around 8:30 or so?
Yes.
Who, if anyone else from your house, was home when you got
I think my husband was home. He was going out. I think I passed him and he was heading out to meet his friends. My son was not home.
And who were the friends that he was going out to meet?
John O'Keefe and Michael Camerano.
So, Ms. Roberts, I'd like to start with just Mr. Camerano. How do you know?
He's been childhood friends with my husband.
And do you know where your husband was going to meet Mr. Camerano and Mr. O'Keefe?
Miss McCarthy's. It's a bar in Canton.
Sort of in the center of town, is that right?
Yes.
And Mr. O'Keefe, how do you know?
I've known him since high school.
And where did you go to high school?
Braintree High School.
And how is it that you came to know Mr. O'Keefe? How would you describe your relationship with Mr. O'Keefe?
He was one of my closest friends.
In addition to John O'Keefe, through growing up and going to Braintree High, were you familiar with any other members of the O'Keefe family?
No.
Yes, Kristen, his sister, was a senior when I was.
You know, if you let a balloon go really
a
slowly.
freshman. John was a year older than me, and Paul was 2 years younger than me. So at some point, I was in school with all of them.
And after high school, at some point, did you come to know any of the members of the O'Keefe family while you were living in Canton?
Yes, my son and John's nephew went to an in-home daycare together. So I went to go pick up my son at one point, and Kristen was there, and we kind of figured out that we lived in the same neighborhood that we were going to be moving into. And then Kristen got sick.
And during that time, sort of when you first reconnected with Kristen, about how old was your son and
My son was 18 months. Patrick he's almost a year older.
My mic's bigger than yours.
And your son and Patrick Furbush, did they end up going to the same school in Canton?
Yes, they went to home daycare. They went to preschool, pre-K. And by the time they got to elementary school, they got separated because they were troublemakers.
Oh, those nasty, naughty boys.
Yes.
Naughty.
Yes.
And what, if any, other activities did your son do along with Kristen's son, Patrick?
Well,
Played
Patrick
Scrabble.
wanted to try hockey. So they did hockey together, and then he didn't like that. And they played baseball together since they were T-ball, like 4 or 5.
Now, you mentioned that Kristen O'Keefe or Kristen Furbush at that point, at some point after you met her, she got sick. Is that right?
Correct.
Eventually, she passed away. Is that right?
Correct.
And, after she passed away, her husband also passed away.
Correct.
And at some point after that, what, if any, role did John O'Keefe have with reference to
Debbie.
Well, when Kristen passed away, I was in
I know,
touch with
just
John,
click on me,
just
Vicky.
seeing if they needed help with the kids, getting them to and from wherever, because I was down the street. Kristen passed away, and then he said, I might move in. Steve's got to figure out finances, but I might move into your neighborhood. And I said, oh, okay. And then when Steve died, John did move in, and he took over raising the kids.
And fair to say that you were, with reference to your son being friends with his nephew Patrick, you would see him fairly often, and by him I mean John O'Keefe.
Oh, yes, daily. Mhm.
And what, if any, at some point did John and his niece and nephew move from down the street from your house?
Yes, they moved across town. So I live on the Milton side. He moved over sort of near the Stoughton side.
About how far a drive is that sort of from your house to where you moved to? It was on Meadows, correct?
Yes, and it depends because Canton's terrible for traffic. Maybe 7 minutes, maybe 8, depending. And if it's in the evening, it's longer.
And after Mr. O'Keefe and his niece and his nephew moved sort of across town, Where did
Oh,
his
yes.
nephew Patrick,
Yes.
where did he go to school?
Oh, you
He remained at the same school that he was at with my son. So on Wednesdays, when John couldn't grab him in time because he'd be working in the city, Patrick would come home with me.
Are you familiar with what Mr. O'Keefe did for a living?
He was a Boston police officer, but at the time he was working in an office registering sex offenders.
And so you would help out as far as picking up his son. What, if any, assistance did you have with regard to his niece Kaylee as well?
Say that one more time.
What, if any, assistance did you have with regard to Mr. O'Keefe and his schedule with regard to his niece Kaylee as well?
I didn't take care of Kaylee as much. That was sort of, there was other women, Jen McCabe, one of them, she sort of really took hold of caring for Kaylee because her daughter was friends with Kaylee and I sort of got Patrick. So
Yes,
John,
you have to keep your voice up. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sorry.
And if you could keep your voice up too, okay?
My apologies. And then through the years that you knew Mr. O'Keefe when he lived in Canton and your time.
Can you hear?
What, if any, conversations would you have with Mr. O'Keefe in regards to
properly?
relationships,
You hear loudly
dating,
properly?
or anything like that?
well, he dated a lot of people.
But
So
as
it
far as
depends.
Your conversations with what, if any, sort of role would you have, or what if any, knowledge would you have in reference to the people that he dated?
My husband, whenever he would go on a date with somebody, he would have my husband come meet them, sort of say like, what do you think? And he had a couple of girlfriends that were very nice.
Now, at some point, did you become aware of a person by the name of Karen?
Yes.
And when was it and how was it that you first came to know that person?
John called me and said, Karen and I are going to stop by because we had people over. And I said, who is Karen? Because I didn't know if he was going to bring someone from high school and surprise me with a random, I had never heard of her. And he said, you know who Karen is? The girl I'm dating. I said, nope, but okay. And then they came over that night.
And
let me fix my hair. I'll put my pearls on.
I think it was sometime in July.
In July of what
year? What are we, 2020? 2020?
Sometime shortly after sort of the COVID pandemic.
Yes.
How would you describe your relationship, if any, with Karen?
She was like another person that took care of the kids. She took care of Kaylee and Patrick a lot. So I would coordinate with her if Ryan and Patrick were going to go to the golfing range or if Ryan was going to go with them to the Red Sox game, that kind of thing. We weren't do lunch. And I went downstairs. I started the car, cleared it off, and I sat there waiting and she didn't come. So I called.
During the time that you're waiting in the car, do you know about how long the period it was that you were waiting in the car?
I would say at least 10 minutes of sitting in the car.
And to that point, as far as when you went outside to the car, what, if anything, did you observe about the weather? And what, if anything, did you do with your car as you were turning it on?
I cleaned the car off. I turned the car on. I got in it. And I thought to myself, well, she thinks he might have got hit by a plow or something. I'll see if there's any accidents. So I called the Canton non-emergency line. And I said, have there been any plow accidents? My friend's boyfriend didn't come home. And they said, no, there were no accidents. So then I called Good Samaritan Hospital in Milton to see if anybody had been brought in a car accident. They said no. And then finally Karen called back.
Before we get to that, just in reference to, at any point in time, did you call Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
And when you called Mr. O'Keefe, were you able to speak to Mr. O'Keefe?
No.
Do you know how many times you called Mr. O'Keefe?
My husband called him, and I think I called him.
And when was that in relation to you going out to your car and clearing it?
That was when I was in the house. Karen actually said, can you try and call him?
And you did, and you didn't get an answer?
Correct.
And do you know whether or not your husband got an answer?
He did not.
So you go out to the car, you're waiting, and you make the phone call initially to Canton Police. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you know who you spoke to at Canton Police?
I believe it was Officer Good.
Is that someone that you knew in any way prior to this date of January 29th?
We have mutual friends, but no, I'd never met him.
Now, you call the hospitals, and then at some point after you finish speaking to the hospitals, the defendant then calls you back, correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, can you describe to the jury sort of what was the content of that conversation that third time?
She said, I said, where are you? I'm in the car. And she said, I'm at Jen's house. And I said, Jen who? She said, Jen McCabe. She's going to drive my car. And I said, okay, stay there. I'll come to there. We'll follow and we'll drop your car off. We'll just take my car and go look for him. And I drove to Jen's and I pulled in the driveway behind them. I was still on speakerphone. Jen is driving. Karen's in the passenger seat, and we drove. I said, do you remember, did you look through the house? Could he be passed out somewhere in the house? She said, I don't know. I didn't look. So I said, let's do that. Let's get in the cars. We're not taking 2 cars. It's a blizzard. We're going to go back to Meadows, and we're going to go look in the house first. He could be passed out behind the couch or on the floor, or who knows. So we went to the house.
And I'm sorry, before you get into that, just as far as directionality and where you're going at this initial stage, you are sort of directing what's going to happen and where you're going to go, correct?
Correct.
Now, you had mentioned that the defendant said she was at Jen's house. You asked Jen who, and she said Jennifer McCabe, correct?
Objection. I'll allow it.
With regards to Ms. McCabe, did you know her, or how did you know her prior to this morning of January 29th?
I had met her once when John took her and I to Reebok because he's got a 50% discount. So we would go periodically and get the kids' shoes. So John, and myself went to Reebok, got shoes, and then we went to the hillside for lunch. That was it. I wasn't friends with her.
Is that someone that you had programmed in your phone as a contact? Did you have her information prior to January 29th?
No.
And when you went to Ms. McCabe's house that morning, how was it that you knew where Ms. McCabe's house was at that point?
I've picked up Kaylee there a time or two for John and brought her home if I was heading that way, because Jen's house is on the way to John's.
And so you go to Ms. McCabe's house, and can you describe for the jury sort of what you observe or what you see when you're first coming up to Ms. McCabe?
I pulled in the driveway behind Karen's car, and Karen and Jen are in the car talking. I'm still on Bluetooth so I can hear them. And Karen said that she remembered leaving him at Waterfall. And Jen said, no, I saw you pull up to my sister's house. And then at some point in the conversation, she said, what about my taillight? What about my taillight? And I looked, and there was a piece missing, but it was caked on with snow. You could tell there was a little black hole, but there was snow like caked on it, and it was a blizzard at this point.
Now, just as far as over the course of this early morning when you're making that drive from your house to Ms. McCabe's house, correct?
Yes.
So during that time, can you describe sort of what the lighting conditions were, what the roadway conditions were, what you observed as you were driving over there?
It was not light out yet, and it was really bad driving.
And bad driving in reference to snow, is that correct?
Yes.
So you get to Ms. McCabe's house, and during the drive from your house to Ms. McCabe's house, you're speaking to both Ms. McCabe and Ms. Reed?
Yes.
And with reference, I think you've said a couple times as far as a Bluetooth. So as far as what you're hearing on the other side of the conversation, is it just one person, or are you able to hear sort of everything that's going on in the car?
I could hear everything. It was like a regular phone call in the car.
From where you were, your impression was it was hooked up to the speaker of the car?
Correct.
And when you get to Ms. McCabe's house, or what you were just testifying about as far as the taillight, when is it that you're making those observations?
In Jen's driveway.
And so about how far away from the defendant's car were you the first time that you see or your attention is drawn to this taillight?
I was parked right
thinking
behind them in the
same thing,
driveway.
How much easier
And can
it
you
is
describe which part of the vehicle you were looking
to
at as
question
far
a
as
normal
which
person.
taillight that you're observing this damaged?
The right passenger.
Someone who's not trying to
And,
conceal.
From there, as far as Ms. McCabe's driveway, you make these observations. Where is it that you go from there?
Say it again.
So after you're making those observations and you're overhearing that conversation or you're having that conversation over Bluetooth, where did the three of you go?
We went to Meadows, to John's house.
And how was it that each of you sort of got from Ms. McCabe's house to John's house on Meadows?
Jen drove Karen's car, and I followed behind in my car.
And when you arrived there, where did you go? Where did you park? Like,
I pulled in, I think I pulled in right behind. She pulled her car sort of in front of the garage bays, and I pulled in the driveway behind her.
and when you say she, do you know who was driving?
Jen McCabe, sorry.
Driving in Miss Reed's in the front passenger seat.
Correct.
And you're driving your car.
Pop quiz. What's
Correct.
the
What kind of car did you?
what the
A
bracelet?
Ford Explorer.
Do you recall what color it was?
Kerry
Dark
Robinson's
gray.
wearing the white one.
And as far
What?
as Miss Reed,
What stone is
what
it?
kind of vehicle she had at that point?
A Lexus SUV.
Recall what color that was?
Black.
Now, with
I believe
respect
it's
to,
a
Mr.
crystal.
O'Keefe, do you recall what kind of vehicle John O'Keefe had?
He has a Traverse.
And do you recall what color that was?
It's like a beige green.
Your Honor,
See
with
how
the court's
you
permission,
are.
if I could ask to publish what's been marked as exhibit number.
Trial trivia.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Mr. Roberts, directing your attention to the screen over here, do you recognize what is up on the screen?
That's John's house.
And does that seem like a fair and accurate portrayal of what John's house looked like at around the time of January 29th?
I still think they all look like the
Much snowier, but yes.
Anton.
I said it was much more snow, but yes.
Now, not visible in this particular photograph, but the driveway that you're talking about, facing Mr. O'Keefe's house at Meadows Ave, as we are in this picture, whereabouts would the driveway be? To the left or the right or something?
To the right.
And, Your Honor, with court's permission, if I could ask to publish what's been marked with exhibit 91.
Okay.
And again, Ms. Roberts, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
That is John's car.
It looks like a beautiful area.
That's behind John's.
Behind a basketball hoop?
No, I'm sorry. That's correct. Not the rear of the vehicle, but sort of in the photograph behind on the other side of the passenger side of the vehicle.
Oh, the garage doors?
And there are two garage doors, one on the left, one on the right. Is that correct? You're familiar with this house? We've been over it a number of times when Mr. O'Keefe lived there.
Correct.
And as far as what
I don't know what happened
to
to
having regarding sort of security around
John's
Security.
niece and
He has a
nephew,
ring camera
where they
that
are
was in
now?
the driveway and a ring camera that was at the side door.
And with regard to the garage itself, as far as you've been in there as well.
Yes.
And
I
so
think it would be
what's
extraordinarily
behind that door?
expensive neighborhood.
His
But it does
big
look
old
beautiful.
blue convertible.
And on the right side of the garage, what if anything is
Have you been there?
Nothing. He's got all organized stuff and kids sporting. I don't know if he parked in there or not.
now as far as how Mr. O'Keefe kept his garage, kept his home, was there a particular way in which he kept it when he lived there, you know?
Neat freak.
I'm sorry, what was that?
He was a neat freak.
Okay.
Nothing
And
wrong with
how
that.
you enter into
Oh.
this garage, what if any access would you then have to inside the home?
So that's what,
There's a set of stairs and it brings you right into
80
like the mudroom,
80
which
kilometers?
leads into the kitchen.
Over?
Now, when you would go over to Mr. O'Keefe's house on this occasion or any other occasion,
Go and take some photos, Bri. You can be the
rules or preferences would Mr. O'Keefe have?
on-site reporter.
You did not wear footwear in the house. You took your shoes off.
And is that something that applied to
Yes.
And how would you describe, is that a relatively strict rule?
Yes.
Now, Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could, I'd like to publish a portion of Exhibit 6, ring video.
Okay.
Gentlemen, if I could have from the driveway, video number 154. I did ask you this on that list. So, Ms. Roberts, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, that's Karen's car and my car, and John's is in the background.
Now, in front of you on the desk, there should be a laser pointer. It's not.
So basically, the three ladies go to look for John at his house, to search his house.
If I could ask you,
That's what that is.
Someone's going to catch their sleeve on
That
that or
bracelet.
something.
What type of crystal is it? I have an idea of what I think it might be.
Now, from there, when you arrive at the house, you go into the house, you take off your shoes. What happened?
I started looking. Jen started looking. Karen, her and Jen went upstairs. I started looking downstairs. I started looking on the other side of the couches to see if maybe he passed out somewhere.
See, that's the
And then I
logical
went
thing.
upstairs and Karen was standing in John's room. The bed was made. She was just standing there. And Jen had gone in to talk to Kaylee. And then I said, all right, let's go.
Now,
He's not in the house.
As far as
He's not in the house.
your knowledge of Mr. O'Keefe, him not coming home when any of the children were home, was that something that was normal?
Him not coming home if the children were home?
Correct.
Yeah, he would not do that.
And obviously you knew Kaylee was there, but what, if anything, did you know as to where Patrick was?
He was at a friend's house.
And was that something that you knew independent of this morning, or what had transpired up to that point?
Say that again?
How did you find out that Patrick was?
Say what?
Karen said, I said, where's Patrick? She said he's at his friend's.
So you were in the downstairs area of the home, is that correct?
Yes.
And looking through the rooms, you didn't find Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
No,
Now, at any point in time, did you go upstairs?
I did.
And when you went upstairs, where in the upstairs did you go?
At the top of the stairs is John's bedroom. So I looked in there. I looked in the bathroom. I looked in the closet. I looked in Patrick's room. I looked in the other two bedrooms, and Kaylee was in her room. So Jen was in there, but I was looking through the house.
And as far as Mr. O'Keefe's bedroom, when you looked in there, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the condition of the bed?
The bed was made.
You mentioned you looked in a variety of different rooms on the second floor. You said sort of two other rooms. What, if anything, was
Lolly.
the room used for, if you know?
I think one of them was a computer room. It was the room that faced the front of the house, and the back room had a bed in it that Mrs. O'Keefe would stay in, because we were looking to see, I mean, I don't know what we were looking for, but we were looking for him. I don't know if we thought he was walking home or if he got hit by a plow. So we went main roads. We pulled out, I think we went Bolivar Street, and then Jen was giving directions because I didn't know where we were going.
And to be clear, Bolivar Street, you're talking about, that's Bolivar?
Yes.
And so then Ms. McCabe is then giving you directions as you're driving, correct?
Correct.
Now, as you're driving, again, as far as what, if anything, did you see as far as plows, or how were the roads treated at that time? What, if anything, did you observe in reference to that?
It was bad driving. There were plows out, but it was really bad driving.
And the visibility as you were driving from Mr. O'Keefe's house to Ms. McCabe's sister's house, how would you describe the visibility?
It was very poor. It was in the middle of a blizzard.
Now, when you get to the street, at some point you're directed by Ms. McCabe to Fairview Road, correct?
Correct.
And when you get to Fairview Road, do you recall whether or not you took a left or a right, or how did you come on to Fairview Road?
Off of Chapman Street, I took a right onto Fairview.
You took a right from Chapman onto Fairview.
Correct.
So
And
the
as you're coming
passenger side
down Fairview Road, what
of the
if anything
vehicle would
did you
be
note or
on the
observe as
side
far
of
as
the
the sort of
property.
elevation of the roadway?
You go downhill.
Do you go down a hill?
Yes.
I think that's right.
This particular area of Canton, obviously you've lived in Canton for several years. Are you somewhat familiar with this area of Canton?
Yeah.
And how is it that you were familiar with the area of Canton prior to this date if you've never been to Ms. McCabe's house?
The commuter rail is right near there that I would take to work.
Are there any schools in that area as well?
Yes, the John F. Kennedy School.
And you mentioned that your son played baseball, correct?
Yes, and
Ball field.
my son and John's nephew also went to the home daycare across the street from the JFK.
Now, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to just publish a brief portion of what's been marked as Exhibit 12.
Okay.
Gentlemen, what I'm going to ask is if you could push this video forward to 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
This is how a true friend reacts.
I'm sorry, if you could play it from there.
Oh, this isn't the 911 call.
Ms. Roberts, from what you've seen on the video, as far as what's depicted in this video, is that a fair and accurate portrayal, consistent with what you observed that morning as you were driving around, going from Mr. O'Keefe's house to Ms. McCabe's sister's house?
Yes.
And the turn that this vehicle is taking at this point in the video, about 2 minutes and 40 seconds in, you recognize what street that vehicle is turning onto?
I believe it's Fairview.
And Ms. Gilman, if you
He needs new wiper blades. Doesn't even look like those wipers are doing anything.
Ms. Roberts, as you're driving from Mr. O'Keefe's house to this address on Fairview Road that you've never been to before, what's going on inside the car?
Karen was frantic. She wouldn't put her seatbelt on, and I was getting nervous because we're driving in a blizzard. She kept leaning in between the two seats. I think at some point she was texting in the back seat, and then she'd be leaning. She was just frantic the whole morning.
Well, what do you
And
expect?
as far as her screaming, do you recall anything specifically that she was screaming, or what, if any, sort of conversation was going on in the car as you were driving?
There was some conversation about a woman I didn't know that was Bella's mom. And she said, Bella's mom never liked me. I think Bella lived near Jen's sister, maybe. I don't know. Some conversation about Bella's mom, and Karen said she didn't like me.
And do you recall where you were in your travels when that topic of conversation came up?
No, I don't recall.
Now, in reference to following that, what, if anything, did you say in regards to any other sort of women?
Any other what?
Following that conversation in regard to Bella's mom, who you didn't know, what, if anything, did you say or introduce into the conversation?
Fairview Road runs along Spring Street, I think it is. Spring Lane. So Spring Lane and Fairview are both off at Chapman Street, and there was a woman he dated that lived on Spring Lane. So when Jen was telling me where her sister's house was, I said, I don't know where Fairview is. And she said, it's near Spring Lane. And I said, oh, where the dance instructor lived. John had once dated a dance instructor. And then Karen said, do you think he could have gone there? Do you think that's where he could have been? No, I was just using it as a reference point. She said it's near Spring Lane. And I knew that the dance instructor lived on Spring Lane.
And just to be clear, when you say the dance instructor, this would be for
True that.
his niece, Kaylee?
Correct.
And
Fill in the blanks.
two of them being Mr. O'Keefe and the dance instructor are dated at some point in the past, correct?
Yes.
How long?
Lolly.
Oh, it was when Kaylee was little.
Oh.
She was probably like 5.
So almost 10 years before this date that you're driving away.
Yeah. Irrelevant.
As you're driving along and driving down Fairview, what is it that you're doing? What, if anything, do you observe Mr. McCabe doing? And then what, if anything, do you observe the defendant?
Well, we were looking for John walking or wherever he may be. So I'm driving and looking on both sides. And I think Jen was looking on both sides. And Karen she would be in the back seat. Then she'd be in between us. Then she'd be in the back seat and then in between us.
And as you came down the hill on Fairview, what, if anything, what happened then?
Jen said, my sister's house is right up here. And all of a sudden, Karen said, there he is, there he is. Let me the F out of this car. And she started kicking the door.
And how was she kicking the door?
With her feet. Well, how was she kicking the door?
How hard was she kicking?
Pretty hard. I mean, she wanted to get out of the car, but it was locked because once you start driving, the back doors lock. So I looked over and I didn't see anything. And I looked at Jen and I said, she's crazy. And I unlocked the door and I sat back and watched. And she ran over to a mound of snow.
And so as the time you're driving down the road, have you seen anything, as you're driving down, sort of looking at the side of the road, have you seen anything on your side of the vehicle?
No.
And when you say she gets out of the vehicle, is it your side or passenger side where Mr. McCabe is? That
The driver's side.
So she gets out of the driver's side of the vehicle and the back passenger, correct?
Correct.
And how quickly does she go sort of from your car to where she ends up?
She ran over to the mound.
And at that point in time, even when she runs over, could you see what she was running over to?
At some point, I realized it was the shape of a body.
And when was that you realized? When in this sort of sequence were you able to realize that?
That was in seconds. Once she ran over to his body, I said, oh my God. And she lifted up his shirt and started to lay on him.
And when you stopped to let her out, where were you in relation to that mound of snow or what you learned?
I think my car was like in the middle of the road. I just stopped.
And in relation to where the mound of snow was, had you driven past it at that point? So where was it?
Yes.
So it was located behind your vehicle?
Yeah.
Ms. Gilman, if you could, I would ask just play on that for about 6 minutes and 30 seconds. What's depicted in the screen in front of this camera angle? Do you recognize what that is?
That's my car.
Is that essentially where you parked your car when Ms. Reed started kicking the doors and got out and ran over?
Yes.
Could just press play for a moment. Pause it. Now, from this video, do you see where in relation to your vehicle, Mr. O'Keefe, where you found Mr. O'Keefe?
Must be awful to watch this again.
Pointer.
Probably hasn't even seen this footage.
Ms. Gilman, if you could, again, just play for about 6.5.
Oh. That's a normal, visceral reaction. Did we see any of that from Miss McCabe? And the answer to my own question as to the stones on her bracelet, I think it might be howlite. HOWLITE. You tell me that Brian and Nicole can't hear that from their bedroom window.
Visuals on the screen again. They're just using the laser pointer and direct your attention to those are.
That is Jen McCabe. That's Karen Reed. That's me.
What are you doing, Jen? You're not really helping much.
Roberts, in relation to what you just saw in the video, as far as at some points, the rear sort of tailgate or hatchback on your SUV, that was in the up position, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall why that was?
Because I was having Jen get the baby blankets to wrap around him out of my car.
And is that something that you just sort of have in the back of your car at all times?
Yeah.
Now, at any point in time in that sequence, did you call anybody or have any sort of phone calls that you made that went to voicemail at that time?
Did I?
Yes.
I don't know.
And so nothing that you recall, is that correct?
Correct.
And did you observe Ms. McCabe make any phone
Butt
calls?
dial anyone?
Just sort of went to voicemail and she left her phone in your car?
Objection. Sustained.
Let me take you back sort of when you're pulling. So as far as the conditions when you pull up and the defendant's banging on the door and gets out and runs over to Mr. O'Keefe. What's depicted in that video, obviously without your vehicle being in the middle of the roadway, is that fair and accurate portrayal of what the road looked like and sort of what you saw upon your arrival?
Yes.
So after the defendant gets out of the vehicle, what did you do? Where did you go?
When I realized it was him or someone, I ran over and I dug his head out of the snow.
And do you recall you recognized the person in the snow was Mr. O'Keefe?
Once I dug his head out, yes.
And do you recall how his body was positioned as far as how was he on his stomach, on his back, on his side?
He was on his back.
And so you brushed some snow away from his head, is that correct?
Off his face.
And when you were brushing the snow off his face, what, if anything, did you observe about his face or the condition of him?
He had blood coming out of his nose and his mouth. And his right eye it looked like a golf ball. His left eye was fine. But the right eye looked like a golf ball.
Now, you mentioned that you wiped some snow from around his head. What, if anything else, did you observe on the rest of his body?
He was bleeding in the back of the head. So when I was I don't know why I was wrapping blankets around his head, but I didn't know. He had a cut on the back of his head.
Do you recall which side of his head that cut was on?
I don't. It just was blood on the blanket that was under his head.
Now, as far as the rest of his body, did that have snow on it as well?
Say it again, I'm sorry?
The rest of his body separate from his head area. What, if any, snow did you observe on the rest of his body?
He was completely covered.
And you know about how much snow was covering the rest of his body?
I would say like 4 inches, maybe 3. I don't really remember exactly how many, but he was covered.
And so with reference to Mr. O'Keefe, and when you arrived there, 3 of you being you, the defendant, and Ms. McCabe, what is it that you were doing when you first sort of come over to Mr. O'Keefe?
Well, Karen was laying on top of him, and I told her to get off him because I was going to do CPR. And I said, Jen, you need to call 911. And I started CPR on his chest compressions. And then Karen was giving him mouth to mouth.
And as far as CPR goes, is that something that you had any training in prior to this?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about that as far as what, if any, training did you have as far as CPR was concerned?
I get CPR certified every 2 years through the American Red Cross at work.
So you start doing chest compressions, is that right?
Correct.
And you direct Ms. McCabe to call 911?
Yes.
It should be a mandatory school subject.
She was doing mouth to mouth, and she was frantic again, running around. And
as she was running around, what, if anything else, was she doing or saying while she was running around?
Did I hit him? Did I hit him? Is he dead? Is he dead?
Is that something that she said once or more than once?
More than once.
And similar to sort of the tonality or the volume of the voice that you were describing before, was that consistent when you're there sort of in front of the house?
Yes.
Now, in relation to where you were with Mr. O'Keefe, obviously you've never been in this house before, is that right?
Correct.
What, if anything, did you observe as far as overhead lights or street lights or anything like that around that area where you found Mr. O'Keefe?
There was a fire hydrant, and there was some weird, like, electrical box thing sticking out of the ground.
But you don't recall any sort of like overhead lights or anything like that?
I don't recall.
Now, this process of you sort of doing compressions and Ms. Reed is doing mouth to mouth and then running around, is the mouth to mouth that she's doing, is that sort of consistent, or is it intermittent between? When is the running around in relation to the mouth to mouth?
I don't remember which was first. Or I was concentrating on doing chest compressions.
And so while you're doing the chest compressions, at some point do first responders start to arrive?
Correct.
And about how long was it from the time that you sort of get out of the vehicle, go over, realize it's Mr. O'Keefe, et cetera, and to when the first responders arrive?
I don't know.
Call the defendants. I know you had mentioned she spoke to Aaron O'Keefe. Was there anybody else that the defendant spoke to or talked to while you were with her in the car?
She spoke to her mother. And then I ended up taking the phone and speaking to her mother, and I gave her my phone number, and I said, I'm going to go to the hospital. She said, please make sure she does not have her purse. She has medication in her purse I don't want her to take.
And then when you arrived back at the scene, what happened then?
She just got out of the car and walked to the ambulance.
And who, if anyone, did she walk, and by she you mean the defendant?
I'm sorry, yes.
And who, if anyone, did the defendant walk from your car to the ambulance with?
She just walked, I think she just walked by herself. I had her phone because I had been talking to her mother. So then one of the first responders came over and said, do you have her phone? And I said, yes. Her mother said, make sure she does not have her purse.
And then following that conversation with one of the first responders, where did you go from there?
I went to go pick up the O'Keefes.
And as far as your drive from Canton, you went to where did the O'Keefes live?
Braintree.
So your drive from Canton to Braintree and then subsequently from Braintree to Brockton, What, if anything, did you observe about sort of the driving conditions at that point?
I was actually on the phone with Katie Camerano, and I did a complete spun a couple times on 93, right near the Braintree exit, so that when I got to the O'Keefe's, that we went back roads to Brockton because I didn't want to go on the highway.
And as far as the O'Keefe's, as far as in your car from Braintree to Brockton, that was both John's mother and father?
Correct.
And at some point you get to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton, correct?
Correct.
And do you know about what time it was that you got there?
I don't know.
When you arrived, where is it that you and the O'Keefe's sort of go within the hospital?
John's brother Paul had already arrived, and then we all walked in. We were in the waiting area. John's cousin actually works on the switchboard. We had been talking to her on the way in because with COVID restrictions, we didn't know if we were going to be able to get in or. So she had come out from the switchboard, her office, because she knew there had been an accident. So she came out to greet her family. And then I asked her to take me to the bathroom to clean up and to the chapel.
And why was it that you had to go clean up?
Say it again.
Why was it that you had to go clean up?
Because I had blood on my hands.
Now, Ms. Roberts, you mentioned that during part of the drive from Canton to Braintree, you spoke to Ms. Camerano, correct?
Yes.
And during either that drive or the subsequent drive from Braintree to Brockton, who, if anyone else, did you speak to over the phone?
Karen called me repeatedly from the ambulance asking if I was going to come to the hospital. Then she called when the O'Keefe's were in the car and said she dropped him off at a party, and Mrs. O'Keefe said, "You just left him?" And Mr. O'Keefe said, "Leave her alone. She's been through enough." She called a few times while we were on the ride. And then she called a lot when we were at the hospital asking if I knew anything, if he was dead, is he dead? She would hang up and then call back, hang up and then call back.
And if you know about how many times was it?
At least 10.
And that same sort of phraseology that she was using on scene as far as if she's dead, she repeated that in the phone calls at the hospital?
Yes.
Now, once you arrive at the hospital and you're able to clean up a little bit, where did you go from there? What happened?
I went to the chapel and I said a prayer. And then I went in and talked to John's cousin, and she said that Dr. Rice was going to ask to meet with the family and that they would be told how John was doing and that they would bring John's family back to see John. So when I came out, they were being called in by Dr. Rice, and I sat in the waiting area.
And after some period of time sitting in the waiting area, what happened?
Mrs. O'Keefe came out and told me John was gone. And then she asked if I wanted to see him. So I did, because I figured it would be better than when I last saw him. Maybe he was cleaned up, but it was not. It was worse.
Sorry, ma'am, but as far as say that it was worse, back into a room where John was, is that right?
Yes.
And what did you see?
He was in a neck brace, and both eyes were huge. Whereas when I found him, it was only one, but they were like black, almost like filled with, I don't know, blood or fluid. They were huge.
Beyond what you observed in his eyes, what, if anything else, did you see on John's body as you were?
He had scratches on his arm.
Do you recall which arm it was?
His right arm.
Do you recall where on his arm?
Like here.
Does the record reflect that the witness is pointing to her forearm?
Yes.
Following that, as far as going in to see John, what happened then?
We came back out to the waiting area. Mrs. O'Keefe wanted to get his necklace off, but I couldn't get it. So her and Paul went back in to get the necklace off. And Karen had called me at some point from the hospital and said, "My father's going to be coming. Can you just keep a lookout for him?" So I said, So when Mr. Reed, her father, walked in, Mr. O'Keefe recognized him and he said, "That's Karen's father." So I went over and I said, "Mr. Reed, Mr. O'Keefe would like to speak to you." And then I just stood there. I didn't know what to do.
And at some point, did you leave from the hospital?
I did. I took Mr. O'Keefe in my car and Paul took Mrs. O'Keefe in his.
And where did the two vehicles, where did you go?
I dropped Mr. O'Keefe off at John's house and then I went home.
And without getting into too much detail as far as the road conditions that you described earlier, how were they?
It was absolutely horrible. I told Mr. O'Keefe, if you see a front door in your vision, we are about to hit a house because I can't see where we're going. And my windshield wiper broke.
Now, so you dropped Mr. O'Keefe off at John's house on Meadows, is that right?
Yes,
And Ms. Reed's vehicle, was that still there at that point?
I think so. I don't recall, but I think so.
And then you went home, is that correct?
Yes.
Later on that day or that afternoon, if anyone came to your house to speak to you in regard to what?
There were 2 officers, but I don't remember their names.
And do you recall which department they were from?
The state police.
As far as the officers that came to your house and spoke to you, you don't recall their names, is that correct?
I don't.
Recall if either one of them was a Trooper Proctor?
It was not.
And where in your house did you speak to
In the dining room.
And did they speak to anybody else at your house at that time?
My husband.
And as far as when they spoke to you and they spoke to your husband, where were you? Starting with yourself, do you know where your husband was when the troopers were speaking to you?
I don't know where he was, but he wasn't in the room with me.
And same as far as when the troopers were speaking with your husband, where were you?
I was not in the room.
Following that, did you have occasion to speak to any other troopers or members of the state police at any point in time afterward?
I've only spoken to Michael Proctor one time. It was from Jen's house.
And when was that?
I don't know, maybe a couple days later, because Jen and I were re-going over what everything had happened. Mrs. O'Keefe had advised us to make a timeline because she said this could be a while. You guys aren't going to remember something years from now. So sit down, write down what you remember. And I, at that point, said, when she first called, she said he was dead. And Jen said, I don't think you've told them that. So Michael Proctor called, or she was on the phone with him, or I don't even know. And I said, could I speak to him? So I told him so that somebody had it documented.
So as far as
Hey, Annie, welcome.
Proctor was concerned, that phone conversation, is that the only contact that you have with Proctor?
Yes.
And if you recall, was it February 1st or so that you met with some troopers at Mr. McCabe's house?
State trooper who?
At some point, did you meet with troopers at Mr. McCabe's house?
Yes.
And if you know, was that on or around a couple days later, like February 1st or so?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I can't be sure.
Were either of those troopers that you met at Mr. McCabe's house, were either of those troopers Trooper Proctor?
No.
And do you recall where within Mr. McCabe's house you spoke to them?
In the living room.
And beyond yourself and the troopers that you spoke to, was there anybody else in the room with you when you spoke to them?
I wondered what the dynamic was there.
Then or subsequent to then,
Okay.
was there any request made by any trooper from the state police in regard to your cell phone?
To my cell phone, yes.
And do you recall if it was that date or a later date?
It was not that day. I think it was the next day. It was within the next 2 days. They wanted to clone my phone.
And did they advise you of anything or give you any form that you had to fill out and execute prior to doing that?
Yes, I had to fill out a form.
Wouldn't it make more sense for John,
your phone was concerned,
being younger, to look after children?
Restrictions or anything that you gave to them as far as what they could look at or what they could clone or what they could do with your phone?
No.
And as far as how sort of that process works as far as the cell phone extraction or anything. Do you know anything about that?
No.
And do you recall how long it was that you were without your phone at the time you handed it over to him to whenever you got it back?
Well, they took
All
both
right,
of our phones at the
Ali.
same time, and we didn't get them back for like 7 or 8 hours.
Next witness. Now we're
Just to be
going
clear, when you say
to
both of our phones, you're
a testimony
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the
regarding
testimony of the court during the case
Aruba.
now hearing to be the truth, the whole truth,
Can't
and nothing
remember
but
this
the truth,
lady's
so help
name.
you God?
I do. All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Laura Sullivan,
Laura Sullivan.
Sullivan.
And where do you live?
Pembroke, Massachusetts.
And how long have you lived in Pembroke?
Almost 6 years.
And who, if anyone, do you live in Pembroke with?
I live with my boyfriend and our 3 children.
That's that statement was made apparently by Karen in Brian Higgins's testimony. So that's Karen's perspective, I think. If he fought that hard that he didn't speak to his mother for years because of it, his heart was in it. Had to be. Yeah, he maybe wasn't cut out for being thrown into the dad position straight away, but yeah, they're not a possession. They're not a toy. They could have shared it, you know, could have made his life easier and had the kids every, weekend or something. It's just sad. Those kids had been through enough already.
2 stepchildren.
Do you know where they are now?
With us half the time, and then my son, Ben.
And your son, how old is he?
He's 10.
I'm sorry.
10. Sorry.
Nope, that's fine. And your stepchildren, how old are they?
15 and 13.
Now, do you work, man?
I do.
What do you do?
I work in human resources.
How long have you been doing it?
Just over 6 years.
Never easy with kids, Dylan. Never.
If I could.
Never
bring your
ever. And
attention
yeah, I
to,
don't.
New Year's Eve.
I don't know where they are now either.
2021 into New Year's Day.
Anyone knows? Pop it
do you
in chat.
recall that time frame?
I do.
And do you recall where you were?
I was in Aruba.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of how often was that a regular trip that you did around that time of year?
Yeah. We've been doing a trip like around that time for, I'd say, 5 or 6 years. This will be our 6th year, I believe.
And over the course of those 5 or 6 years that you've done that, when you say sort of we, how did that start and how has that expanded, if at all?
So we've been going, Josh and I have been going to Aruba for years.
Right, so this lady organizes a trip to Aruba, and I think there end up being like 40 to 60 people going on this trip. And Karen and John were one of the couples that accompanied all of them. And they all stayed in a timeshare apartment, hotel. They all had their own rooms. Karen wanted separate rooms from the kids. And they were sort of on opposite sides of the hotel. And this, what's her first name? Sullivan. Her sister went as well. And we'll skip ahead to what happened with Etty, or what is allegedly
200. But the hotel is small enough that it was separated by a lobby, the front entrance, the outside entrance.
This is I forgot what I was going to say now. This is the New Year's of 21-22. So John died on January 29. 2022, so 29 days prior. Yeah. I want to get to the bit where.
Marietta, did you have other sort of
There we
immediate
go,
family
Marietta.
on this trip as well?
My mother was with us as well.
And with regard to your sister Marietta and your mother, what if anything
Oh,
was there?
missed one,
as far as
sorry.
Where were each of them staying?
So they had their own room. I think it was a couple away from us on the 5th floor.
Is that the top floor as far as this hotel is
Yes.
concerned? Now, once you arrive back
They're
from
still
there,
so
where
bitter
were
about it,
you
isn't
and
he?
your
Still.
We go to the pool area. The kids can swim. We ring in the new year at the pool bar, watching it on the TVs, and then watching the fireworks.
Now, when you came
Yeah, because she was
back to the
texting someone
hotel,
else.
you went at some point to the pool area. Your sister Marietta, do you know where she went?
She actually, when we got back from dinner, she went up to her room with my mom and essentially put my mom to bed because she didn't want to be up anymore. But she went to go change as well.
Now, when you came down to the pool area, as far as Mr. O'Keefe and or Miss Reed was concerned, did you see them in that area?
I saw John, I want to say around 10:30-ish. I don't know the exact time. It was definitely before midnight.
And where in relation to the hotel did you see him at 10:30?
He was standing behind me at the pool bar.
And at some point does your sister come out to the pool area after putting your mother to bed?
Yeah, so right before I saw John at the pool bar, I saw my sister. She came out and she was visibly upset.
And, Your Honor, in regard, excuse me, to the instruction that you had requested about this, maybe.
All right, thank you. So, jurors, you're about to hear testimony about certain conduct or behavior allegedly committed by Ms. Reed. Be mindful that the defendant is not charged with committing any crimes other than those charged within the indictments. The witness's testimony may not and indeed must not be considered by you as any evidence that the defendant has a bad character or as evidence that she has a propensity to commit the crimes with which she has been charged. You may not take the defendant's prior acts as a substitute for proof that the defendant committed the crimes charged here, but you may consider the acts solely on the limited issue of the state of mind of the defendant and the nature of her relationship with John O'Keefe as it might go to motive or intent. You may not consider this evidence for any other purpose. Specifically, you may not use it to conclude that if the defendant committed the act or acts, that she must also have committed the offenses with which she's charged. You can only use the evidence for the limited purpose of how it goes to the defendant's state of mind, the nature of her relationship with John O'Keefe, as it may go to motive. And just for the records, my findings are the same that I made at sidebar previously. Go ahead, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Now, with regard to, at some point, your sister comes out to the pool area where you were, is that right?
Correct.
And do you know where Mr. O'Keefe was at that point?
I do not know.
And when your sister comes out to the pool area, what happened?
She said,
Yeah, that's sustained. I thought you were doing something else.
He jumped up, didn't he?
When
That was
your sister
quick.
comes out to the pool area, how would you describe her demeanor when she comes out?
No, I'll allow that.
she was frustrated.
And at some point, did you have a conversation, without regard to what the conversation was, at some point, did you have a conversation with her about something that had just happened?
Yes.
Now, following that conversation with your sister, at some point subsequent to that, Mr. O'Keefe,
testimony, Brian.
After I spoke with her, yes, he came out to the pool area.
And do you know about how long a period of time it was between the time that your sister came out to the pool area and Mr. O'Keefe came out to the pool area?
I mean, I would say approximately 20 minutes, but I don't really know exact timing.
Now, when Mr. O'Keefe came back out, did you have any conversation with him?
I did.
And can you describe that conversation?
All right, is this the instruction that you were talking about instead of the other one? All right, so jurors, I have another instruction for you. So you're about to hear evidence of statements made by John O'Keefe. Is that accurate now, Ms. Tillelli?
Yes.
All right. These statements are being admitted only for a limited purpose of establishing John O'Keefe's state of mind. You're not to consider this testimony as proof that the defendant has a bad character or propensity to commit crimes. The testimony of witnesses recounting conversations with Mr. O'Keefe can only be used as they go to the defendant's motive or intent on January 28th or 29th, and only if you find that the defendant was aware of Mr. O'Keefe's state of mind at the time of the crime and would be likely to respond to it. There need not be direct evidence that the defendant learned of Mr. O'Keefe's state of mind, so long as you reasonably can infer from the evidence that she did learn of it. Okay, Mr. Lally.
Subject to our objection.
Yes, yep.
So, Ms. Sullivan, if I could take you back again. So Mr. O'Keefe comes out, you have a conversation with him. Can you describe to the jury what that conversation was about?
I turned around and I was pretty shocked to see him. I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Nothing." I said, "Did Etta and Karen have words?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, that's not what Etta said." And I asked him if everything was okay. And at that time, his phone was lighting up, and it looked like calls and texts.
Got the same nails
And it
as
said
me.
Karen on his phone.
After you make that
I
observation,
like
what
her.
did you say to John?
I asked him if he needed to take it, and he said, "Yes, she's crazy. I got to take care of this."
And was that the last time that you saw him on New Year's Eve?
It is.
Now, turning your attention to the following day, New Year's Day, did you see either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms. Reed at all on that day?
I did not. I saw the children, but we didn't see them that day. No.
Now, turning your attention to the following day, being January 2nd, what was sort of the plan as far as what was going on that?
Our hotel has a private island. The hotel that we stay at has a private island, and we rented all 8 of the cabanas between the 60 of us that were there. And when the cabanas went on sale, I had reached out to John and asked him if he wanted me to get him one. And he said, sure. So I booked one for him, and he paid me for that cabana. So we all went out that morning. And it was probably around, 10 o'clock in the morning, and they weren't there yet. And so I sent him a text and I said, are you coming, or do you want me to sell this cabana? Because there was other, couples there. At least he could have made, the money back. And he asked me who was there. And I said, everybody. And I named off, I think I named off a couple names. I'm not really sure, but I said, everybody's here.
And when you said that, how did Mr. O'Keefe respond?
He said, well, apparently I made out with your sister the other night, according to Karen.
Now, is that the first time that you had heard that?
Yes.
So fair to say whatever you had heard from your sister on December 31st was not that?
Objection.
No, I'll allow that.
Correct.
And what was your reaction when Mr. O'Keefe told you this?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I was shocked. I immediately found my sister and said, did you make out with John?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, when you went to talk to your sister, who was it that your sister was with when you went to talk to her about this?
I don't recall who was standing near her. Maybe my mom. I don't know.
As far as your sister was concerned at that time, was she dating someone?
Yes,
And the person that she was dating, was that person on the trip as well?
he was. Yes.
And was that person that she was dating that was on the trip as well? Were they at the cabanas on that day that you were
They were. Yes.
there? Now, as far as you have some conversation in regard to your sister, and then at some point you go back and have further conversation with Mr. O'Keefe.
Yeah, I said I texted him back. I said I just talked to Etta. She said absolutely not. That did not happen.
Objection. Move to strike.
That's sustained. I'll strike that.
Now, at some point after that exchange, did Mr. O'Keefe and or Ms. Reed and or the kids come out to the cabana area?
They did, yes.
And at any point, how would you describe sort of how Mr. O'Keefe and or Ms. Reed was acting when they came out to the cabana?
But Karen immediately went in the water. I just recall her being like floating in the ocean for a good chunk of the day. John was hopping around from the different cabanas, talking to people.
Let's hear from the sister, shall we?
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
This is Edda.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Sure. My name is Marietta Sullivan. Last name is Sullivan.
And where do you live?
Right now I live in Plymouth.
And how long have you lived in?
Since July of the past summer, so not even a year yet.
And do you work there?
I do.
And what do you do?
I'm a director at a memory care community.
How long have you been doing that?
Just over a year.
Now, do you have any siblings?
I do.
And how many siblings do you
I have two.
have? Older, younger?
Both older.
And brother, sister?
Brother and sister.
And your sister, what is her?
Laura Sullivan.
And what is sort of the age difference between yourself and your sister Laura?
We are 10 years apart.
Now, if I could turn your attention to New Year's, specifically 2021 into 2022. Do you recall that time frame?
I do.
And do you recall where it was that you were or where you were going for that time?
Yes, sir. We were going to Aruba for a family trip.
And is that sort of an annual family trip?
It has become since then. It was the first time I had attended.
And do you recall sort of the time frame on that trip as far as when you were leaving, when you were coming back?
Yeah. So we left on Friday the 31st and we returned the next week, Friday the 7th.
And when you say we, who is who?
My mother and I flew out together with another group of people to meet my sister and brother-in-law down in Aruba.
And at that time, so to meet them down there, had your sister Laura, had she flown down prior to you?
She had, yes.
And at that particular time, were you dating someone?
I was seeing somebody, yes.
And the person that you were seeing, was that person coming on the trip as well?
He was, yeah, the day after we got there.
So your sister arrives on the 30th, you arrive on the 31st, and the person you were seeing arrives on the 1st.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you arrived there, do you know about how many people were on this trip?
I would say over 30, upwards of, I would say over 30 is the best estimate I could give you.
And as far as this trip was concerned, do you recall where you stayed?
Yep, we stayed at the Renaissance Aruba.
Is that someone that you stayed on this occasion as well as subsequent occasions?
Yes.
And on the 31st, when you and your mother arrived, do you recall about what time of day it was that you got there?
So our flight landed around 3:30-ish. I would say we weren't at the hotel much later than that.
And with regard to the hotel has a lobby area, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe to the jury sort of what does that layout look like? What does the lobby look like?
Sure. So right when you walk in the front doors, right in front of you is the check-in desks, 3 or 4 of them in front of you. To the left of you, when you come in, is a hallway to one side of the hotel. To the right of you is a bank of elevators that leads to another hallway that leads to the other first floor side of the hotel. You're in a big lobby, and then directly across from where the elevators are is the entrance to the pool area.
And when you arrive there at some point in time on the late afternoon of the 31st, you obviously check into your room, and then following that, where do you go from there?
So we checked into our room, and then happy hour was starting around 4:30. So we met everybody down at the pool for that time.
Is there a bar in that area of the pool?
Yes, pool bar.
And so when you get down to the pool bar area, who, if anyone specifically, did you see or did you run into?
So first ran into my sister, gave her a hug, the rest of the kids and my brother. As soon as I got into the pool, I ran into Johnny and a couple of our other friends that were sitting at the pool bar down there.
And with reference to who you referred to as Johnny, what's his last name?
John O'Keefe.
And that was someone that you knew at the time, is that correct?
Yes.
And how did you know Mr. O'Keefe?
He was a very, very dear family friend. He was very close to my sister, subsequently became very close to me and my family as a result. And he was my nephew's godfather.
And fair to say that you had known him for some substantial period of time?
Yeah, since Ben's father unfortunately passed away.
So at this point in time, when we're talking about turning from 2021 to 2022, how long had you known Mr. O'Keefe at that point?
Oh man, probably about 8-9 years. It's as long as my nephew's been alive.
And when is it that you would see, or how often would you see Mr. O'Keefe?
Family parties, any family party that we threw, kids' birthday parties, and my sister's Christmas party that she would throw every year.
And how would you describe sort of the nature of your relationship with Mr. O'Keefe?
He was similar to a big brother to me. He was somebody who was there for my sister during her darkest times. So I really respected him for that. But yeah, he was a big brother and a family friend.
Now, when you saw Mr. O'Keefe at the pool bar after you arrived there, what, if any, conversation did you have with him, or what, if anything, were the two of you doing around that?
So I went up to him in the pool. He had his Alabama hat on. He expressed to me that he was excited to watch the Alabama football game at the pool bar. Given the circumstances, we were in a beautiful tropical place, and he got to watch his favorite college team play football. And he said that's all he really wanted to do for the day, was be able to watch that game.
Now, at this point in time that you're talking to Mr. O'Keefe, were you aware of him dating anybody? Had you met anybody that he was dating at that time?
I had not met the person that he was dating. I had heard about her through family friends and other people that were on the trip.
So as far as the other sort of family events that you would see Mr. O'Keefe at, Ms. Reed, or his girlfriend at that time, wasn't there with him?
No.
So after the time that you spent at the pool bar that afternoon, do you recall what else you did that evening?
Yep. So most of us in the group had dinner reservations. I believe they were around 7 p.m. and we were all getting ready to leave the pool bar to get picked up around 6:30.
And as far as a fairly large group that went out to dinner that night?
Yeah, most of us.
And was Mr. O'Keefe part of that group that went out to dinner?
He was not.
Do you recall about what time it was that you got back to or returned to the hotel?
Most of us got back a little after 9. Taxis were kind of crazy to get, so little after 9.
And when you got back to the hotel, where did you go?
I went upstairs to check on my mom. She had gone in a bank of taxis before me, so I went upstairs to make sure that she was up there and safe and in the room.
And so however long you spent up in the room with your mother, at some point did you come back?
I did.
And when you
I
came back
agree.
down, by down,
I was just mesmerized then.
Yep. So we were on the 4th floor of the hotel. So I took the elevator up and then I took it back down to the
midnight
lobby.
here in Melbourne, and I'm just
At that
watching her
point,
eyes
in
blink, and
time when you're
my eyes were
getting back
getting
up there
heavier.
and going up the
Yeah.
stairs and back down, were you aware of
Welcome,
where
welcome to
Mr.
everybody.
O'Keefe and his niece and nephew were staying?
Yeah, I knew where they were staying. Yes. Room wise. Yep.
And where was that in relation to the lobby?
1st floor.
So lobby's on the 1st floor, their rooms are on the 1st floor.
Oh, where were the public
When the
toilets,
elevator
Lolly?
gets down to the, when the elevator gets down to the lobby level, you get out, is that correct?
Mhm.
And what if anything?
So you have to
Sorry.
say, okay.
You just have to answer yes or no.
Yes. Sorry.
That's okay. So the elevator gets down to the lobby, you walk out, who, if anyone, do you see when you come out?
So
I
when
actually
the elevator
think
opens up, the first
woman
person
is-
I saw was the attendant standing behind the desk. I didn't see
Super
anybody else in the
attractive.
lobby with me until I stepped
Not gonna
out.
lie.
When I stepped out, I looked to my left and I saw Johnny coming in through the first set of outside doors.
Now, as far as Mr. O'Keefe was concerned, was there any other sort of term that you would use to refer to him?
Johnny or Godfather.
And, Your Honor, I think this may be the appropriate.
All right. So folks, I'm going to say again that first instruction I gave you with the last witness, that you're about to hear testimony about certain conduct or behavior allegedly committed by the defendant. Ms. Reed is not charged with committing any crimes other than those charged within the indictment. So this witness's testimony may not and must not be considered by you as any evidence that the defendant has a bad character or as evidence that she may have a propensity to commit the crimes with which she's been charged. You may not take the defendant's prior acts that you'll hear about as a substitute for proof that the defendant committed the crimes charged here. But you may consider the
Australia.
act solely on the limited issue of the defendant's
Melbourne,
state
Australia.
of mind and the nature of her relationship with John O'Keefe as it might go to motive or intent. You may not consider this evidence for any other purpose. Specifically, you
I'm
may
streaming
not
on
use
both
it to
channels
conclude
at
that
the
if the
moment.
defendant committed these acts, that she must also have committed the offenses with which she's been charged. You can only use the evidence for the limited purpose of how it goes to the defendant's state of mind, motive, and the nature of her relationship with John O'Keefe.
The channel.
And for the same findings that I made at sidebar.
Pick.
Yes.
So you know you've got it right.
So you walk out of the elevator, you're by yourself, correct?
Yes.
And you see Mr.
So
O'Keefe.
that-
Could you see where Mr. O'Keefe was?
That is the
in
other
lobby or where he was?
station, or other channel I have.
He was coming from the outside doors into the lobby.
Completely different content to this one.
Opposite side. Yes.
And when you see him come in, who, if anyone, did you see with him initially?
Nobody with him.
And what, if anything, was he doing, or how was he acting sort of when he came?
So he sort of stumbled in. I came out of the elevator and my initial response to him was, "Whoa, you
So
okay?"
you must be
I actually
watching.
said, "Whoa, Godfather, are you okay?" But yeah, he was stumbling into the lobby.
And did you go over to him at that point?
I did. I went up to him and I gave him a hug.
And
I'll post this in there for you.
I pulled
Amy,
back.
I have
He
two
was
channels. So
glassy-eyed, looking above me. We never made eye contact. He was looking above me. It looked like he was looking for someone. I asked him, "Where are you going?" assuming that he would be coming to the pool bar to meet us. He kept looking around and he indicated that he was going that way and pointed toward a bank of rooms to our right. And I said, "Well, you should go that way." And I stepped back and I guided him toward the area that he was going.
now, as far as the bank of rooms to the right, you indicated that you were familiar or aware of where Mr. O'Keefe was and where the children were. Is that correct?
I know they were on the first floor. I'm not 100% positive as to where exactly their rooms were.
And if you know, did you know whether or not that Mr. O'Keefe was staying in the same room as Patrick and Kaylee at that point?
I didn't know if they were staying in the same room or not, no.
So you point him in that direction, and what happened?
So I pointed in that direction. He walked off. I continued out to the pool bar when I heard very loudly his name screamed across the lobby very angrily, and it made me stop in my tracks.
And when you stop in your tracks, what happened?
I started to turn around to come back in. So once you go out to the pool bar, you kind of go around a corner and you go out of view. So I turned around to go back in. As I'm going back in, I hear someone yell, "Who the fuck was that?" And as I come around the corner, I see Mr. O'Keefe walking toward a woman. And he said, excuse me. He said, "Calm down, that's Laura's little sister."
And what happened then?
When I came back around the corner, I said, after Mr. O'Keefe said, "Calm down, that's Laura's little sister," I said, "Hi, nice to meet you." That's when Miss Reed's head snapped up and she very loudly told me to go fuck myself across the lobby. And I said, "Yeah, fuck you too," and walked away.
And just to be clear, when you say Miss Reed,
Fair enough.
This is someone that you became familiar with as the trip went along?
This was my first interaction with her. I had never been fully introduced to her at all. I just had seen her sitting by the side of the pool when I had been talking to Johnny earlier in the day.
And the person you know to be Miss Reed, do you see her in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you just describe as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
Sure, she's in a black and white checkered blazer. She's 2 people in from you.
Or as the defendants beyond the yelling, what, if anything, did you observe as far as her demeanor or how she was acting at the time that this interaction was going on?
she was just very loud. She very, energetically screamed for me to go fuck myself. She was waving her hands. Johnny was trying to calm her down. And after I said, yeah, fuck you too, I went out to the pool bar. So I didn't see much after that.
And could you hear anything as far as when you were walking out to the pool bar, as far as any other conversation between the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe?
Not after that first time, no.
You go back or you go out to the pool bar, and who, if anyone, did you talk to?
I went straight up to my older sister, Laura, who was out to dinner with the couple the night before. And I said,
I'll allow this part.
I went up to her and I looked at her and I said, John O'Keefe's girlfriend. And she looked at me and said, Karen. And I said, yeah, you guys like her? She said, yeah, she's okay. And I said, well, she sucks.
Now, following that, that particular, at any point in time later in that evening, did you see either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms. Reed?
Which was the day that we rented cabanas on the island.
I'll see you at sidebar quickly.
I think that's the end of the stream. I do believe. Yep. Right. Well, that was day 17. So, has everyone seen Brian Higgins? That's interesting. Very, very interesting. So we'll cover that one tomorrow. I might stream it a little bit earlier. Possibly. I'll see how the day pans out, because there's no court tomorrow. So we've got a day to catch up on a trial that I wasn't even going to follow. Now, I will mention the other trial that I was going to start, the Cheyenne Porter and Jose Alvarez trial. I've been able to find the docket and all the information of what court they're in and where they're at, but I cannot find anywhere that I, from Australia, can access the link to any live streams for that trial. So unless someone is able to forward me a link, because it just, I think it's something to do with me being in Australia and it not being allowing me to access any of the live streams for, I think it's a lot smaller channel perhaps, or I might have to go through Zoom on the court, but yeah, it won't allow me. Unfortunately, I won't be able to follow that trial like I'd planned. So we'll do this one. We have apparently the 17th of June, Tyrone Tucker is due to go back for a motions hearing at Key West. For all of you that have followed my streams, he has been arrested again and is in... he was arrested at Portland, Oregon, and he's been transported back to Key West. So he's now in Florida awaiting his hearing. I haven't had any other updates other than that. If you want to know any more detailed information, Justice is a Process, on their YouTube channel, Stephen has a heap of information, and he has a great knowledge basis of the legal system, and it has a really good way of explaining it in an easy to understand way, much better than me. So he's fantastic. I would recommend you go over there, like and subscribe. Justice is a Process. And also Adam Kearney and Turtle Boy Live. He can be a little bit not child friendly with his language, but that doesn't bother me. So if it doesn't bother you, then head over there and like his channel as well. He's got so much information on Karen Reed, and yeah, a ton of it. He's followed it right from the start, so it's definitely worth a watch. So that brings us to the end of another one. There we go. It's 12:30 here in Melbourne. It's Jodie's bedtime, and yeah, we shall hear from Mr. Higgins. Just you wait, Henry Higgins. Yeah, I know. I get silly when I'm tired. All right. So, good night, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching, and have a fantastic rest of your day, weekend, night. Enjoy. Thanks again.
Covering true crime and police arrest, where the judges move and the defense rests. Watching courts and trials, criminals at best, where the gavel drops and the defense